Cool. We're going. Welcome back to the movie whale marathon. We're on
Battle for the Planet
Battle
of
for
the
the Planet of
Apes?
the Apes from 1973. And I just
Uh-huh.
had up who directed it. I'm Andrew, by the way.
And I'm Mac.
Yes, you are. Directed by J. Lee Thompson. Cool.
Gonna be
So,
honest, it doesn't really mean anything to
no,
me.
it doesn't. I just figured I'd say it. This is the
Okay.
first time I've seen this one all the way through. So
Oh.
this is where we start sharing the experience of never seeing them.
Uh-huh.
Um, how do you feel about it?
Um,
Should we do our brief little summary thing?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's what? It's roughly 12 years after the ending of the last movie, which was
Mm-hmm.
uh uh it's a conquest of what
Yes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes.
yes, I should know this. Okay. 12 years after the ending of the last movie, and Caesar has got a great little ape society with humans slightly integrated into it. When,
Mm-hmm.
for reasons that are honestly kind of convoluted, he and his ape friend and human friend, whose name is McDonald, but it's not the same McDonald, it's the brother of the
It's his
McDonald,
brother.
which is so dumb. They go to
They just
the
didn't get the same actor back, but they wanted the same character.
who cares? Just recast. Anyway, they go to a lightly radiated city to get some information. They bump into humans that are kind of surviving, which causes a quote unquote war, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It is aptly
Well,
named. It's one battle.
really, it's and this gets into commentary just a little bit, but what the reason they have a problem is because the human characters in the city, irradiated city, are flat, just aggressive characters. The,
Yeah.
the, the only the only like personality trait or culture they have is let's kill the apes,
Yeah.
and it
Except
doesn't
for one.
actually
Except for one guy,
matter.
because they
Except for
wanted
one
to.
guy
Yeah.
who like says something about it, and he's immediately shot down, and then it doesn't
Yeah.
come up again. Like,
It's Yeah. Also, throughout this, there is a subtle, I guess, coup going on within the ape community, led by the
subtle.
gorillas. Yes. Led by the ape named Aldo, who, if we recall from not Caesar's, Cornelius's stories, was supposed to be the first ape to
Was the
speak and the one
lawyer?
that create the uprising and the original
Uh-huh.
timeline and all that. So, and then it ends with a flash forward 600 years in the future where apes and humans now live in harmony. Great. That's wonderful. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, I don't even know why it exists. I feel like nothing happens. like
You actually make a great point. I mean, I think it is a little interesting to see
there are
the society kind of
concepts.
develop.
Yes.
There are concepts in this
But
that are
we
interesting, like especially the
don't get to
armory
watch it
guy.
develop.
Super
Yes.
interesting.
But like the armory guy, if we want to skip all the way ahead to the
Mhm.
armory guy, he at one point says that he's been in that armory for 27 years.
Which isn't possible
It's not
because it's only
possible.
roughly
And
16 years after.
there's no way if someone wants to argue because they're a big Planet of the Apes fan like us clearly that he's referring to he worked in the armory as an ape slave before
I
the
don't know
up.
that you can count that.
Well, no, I don't even. Let's just say you can. There's no way
Uh-huh.
an ape was put in charge of weapons.
Yeah,
There's no way that was a thing. So
yeah.
what are you talking about, dude? What are you talking about? When Virgil says he was my teacher, I could believe that. Maybe he was a young ape
Mhm.
when everything started, and he was the teacher then 12 years ago, and whatever, and things have changed and developed. 27 years? No. What are you talking about? Anyway, I just
Yeah.
there's
I Well, starting from the beginning,
yes.
just running through some notes. I do like that even though in Conquest they changed the ending from violence to peace,
Hmm.
I like that even though I think that violence would have been a more fit ending for that movie, I like that peace is committed to in this
Yes,
movie.
it's
They
consistent.
don't like yeah, they don't go back on it. They don't go, "Oh, we were wrong to change that," which,
Right.
probably were. But like, hey, they made their choice. They stuck with it. They tried to figure out a way to make it work, and they did okay. The
Hmm.
plot is weak, but the philosophy and the consistency of the morals in the story, I think, are fairly consistent. Like they're pretty good.
That's fair. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I do like that they are consistent with it. It does feel like it's still a natural growth from where we left off, but it just I
mhm.
feel like it would have been way more interesting to see them develop this society than to hop 12 years in. And
Mm.
like now things are like
We're kind of in the growing pains phase rather than the establishing phase.
we are, but we're also in a very
Mhm.
confusing stage where for one, I don't particularly love that everything just looks like the Planet of the Apes now. Like the
Mm.
orangutans are wearing their orange, the gorillas are in their
Mhm.
their like
Well, I
black
mean, that was
leather.
actually coded in the slave like culture
Not
as
well,
well.
but
Like,
like the gorillas were wearing red in the. I
yeah.
mean, but like that part, you're right. I guess that's just a nitpick. I'm bitching to bitch, but the thing I found the most ridiculous was like now 12 years in, McDonald's like, "Hey, there are recordings of your parents if you're interested.
Yeah.
You want to go check them out?" It's like, "Oh, yeah,
Could have said
cuz
that sooner. I
I've
mean, it's not
only
like he needed to go see it until this
yeah."
moment, maybe, but like that feels like something you would have shared
And the
before.
conversation that like kicks off the plot of this is how Caesar thinks that apes will lead the world into a future peacefully and it'll be fine and there won't be any issues at
Hmm.
all. And McDonald's like,
Hmm.
haha, no, because your parents said that apes destroyed everything, so eat shit. It's like, you never had this conversation once? Never. Never in 12 years did you talk about this?
Well, I think it's at least in the setup of the plot, it's supposed to be particularly relevant because of Aldo's recent actions. Like
Mhm.
Aldo is this. He calls himself a general, but I don't know if he actually is appointed that or
Yeah,
if he just says he is.
I can't tell exactly.
Um,
They really
he
doubled down on the gorillas being just an absolute
aggressive.
aggressive pain in the ass in this
Hmm.
movie. Like,
So he like it starts with him in a classroom refusing to learn, which it's a decent part of foreshadowing actually. It says it's what they're learning is ape will not kill does not kill ape or ape
mhm.
cannot kill ape, whatever the phrase is exactly. And he refuses to learn how to write it and he won't even say it because he's just being that stubborn student in the back of the classroom. And there's actually a quote that the teacher said that I was just I had a tough day in class and I felt it.
Oh, did you?
But yeah. He was like, "You won't learn. You won't because you can't, and you can't because you don't want to learn." And I'm just,
Mhm. Mhm. But like, okay. Let's absolutely admire and reflect on the genuine interest that is this scene. All these
mhm,
students, a human teacher learning to write. We get this ape will not kill ape thing, which ends up being really really big in the reboot trilogy. So like there are things that
yeah.
they pull from that are significant. But my God, could you not have appointed an orangutan to teach everyone to learn how to write? Like, why would you do this to this poor teacher? Why would you do this? There's no way in hell that this conflict of an ape not liking being taught by a human started now. Like, there's no
Mhm.
way. So, again, I think it's just one of those things where, like, they're manufacturing tension. Like, that just doesn't feel
Suppose I
natural.
think it was. I don't. I think that makes sense though, because I think sure an orangutan could teach, but if we're being practical here, even if it's been like 12 years, humans would have a larger store of knowledge and
True.
especially when it comes to pedagogy.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's out of the realm of possibility that there would be a human teacher. I
I,
think that it's a little idealistic, but that's
right.
actually pretty fitting for Caesar, I think. He sometimes doesn't always believe in it, but he is an idealist. Like he
Mhm.
struggles with it, but he does essentially believe that it can be done, and so he's gonna make it happen.
Right, no, totally fair. Totally agree. It's just a little strange when you are showing back to back within like we're hopping back and forth between scenes. The human teacher who is struggling to
Mhm.
get his students to listen and pay attention because of the difference in species, while then simultaneously showing the orangutans talking about quantum theory and
Good
time
point.
distortion. Like, you
Virgil,
are establishing you have insanely smart apes right now that could easily
yeah.
be teaching all the apes to just spell 4 words. Like, you could do that. They're not doing arithmetic. Like, I don't know. It's just you're introducing different interesting ideas that I think are conflicting with I like
that they show in the movie.
Right, that would just easily fix the conflict that you are creating, where it wouldn't make sense that this conflict would start. And that's just I think it's also a bit of a nitpick because yeah, it might also be that Caesar just wanted to save this human because he's trying to be good and this human's a teacher and what else can he do and blah 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 blah.
Right.
But damn, man, like you could have saved them a lot of stress. Well, and I feel like this is
connected to the outline of humans saying no as well, because I understand, especially given the setup in the previous movie, like no was like this trigger word that they like shocked apes to like respond to, and so there's like a lot of trauma associated with the human yelling no at them. I get it. Telling someone that they can't use the word no, though, is extremely limiting and impractical.
In a classroom, especially.
Yeah.
Like, what are you supposed to do?
Outline it was a bit extreme, which they actually do kind of note that the humans are living as second-class citizens in this society, and that is something that they deal with. It's just because the movie is dealing with so many different conflicts, that one doesn't seem like it gets a lot of attention. And at the end, they just kind of like wave a wand over it and say that it's fixed when that's a really complex problem that no amount of decreeing things is actually going to make go away.
Well, I think there's a very interesting movie in this movie if it was just about this new society and the conflict between Caesar, Aldo, and the humans that are involved. I think don't involve the radiated city people at all.
Agreed. Because they were not necessary.
No, they weren't. And honestly, it was just kind of dumb and clearly like a little nod to the radiated humans from the second Planet of the Apes. But like it does nothing. And those characters are awful. It's that governor assistant fucker from the last movie who's somehow still alive, who's like, yeah, I'm just bored. We haven't done anything in years. Let's just go to war. Let's just go attack the apes. Like, why not? Like, oh.
Yeah, I think there's a line that straight up says, if we attack them, we'll break 12 years of peace.
Like, yeah, you know,
and they're like, it's been boring.
Yeah, it's like, you know, ew. Also, they keep transversing this space that is supposed to be like a 3 days journey very quickly. But then it also, they end up causing this weird conflict that I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about because they end up invading Ape City. And Aldo ends up being prepared for it. But Aldo's not, it's like...
He doesn't actually fight in the actual battle.
Right, but he goes and takes the weapons because his scouts see the humans coming. So it's like, okay, as a viewer, I don't want anything to happen to Ape City. So am I supposed to root for Aldo right now because he's defending them? But no, I'm not supposed to root for Aldo because he just killed Caesar's son. Spoiler, he killed Caesar's son. He's an idiot. He's not trying to do anything for good reasons. He's locking up all the other humans in the camp, but he's going to end up being the only reason that they're defended. And then he's not even the only reason that they're defended. Yeah. So like, what are you doing? What are you doing, movie?
I mean, to be fair, taking out the humans was his first step in a coup. Like, he was taking the weapons, he was killing the humans first, like full-on extermination. He was going to go to the city and kill them. They just happened to arrive at Ape City, but it's not really a city, Ape Village, whatever.
Patch of land.
And yeah, like they're 5 tree houses. Yeah. But then, so it was going to be take out the humans and then come back and take out Caesar so that I'm in charge. Which, you know, thinking about it, did none of the apes realize that probably meant killing Caesar? And at the end of the movie, it's like a really big deal. Spoiler, that Aldo killed Cornelius. Well, and
they cut that off at the heels or the knees, whatever the saying is. When he says that, it's like first we'll take out the humans, then Caesar. The gorillas in his little campfire are all like, "Fuck, what? I mean, I didn't I didn't agree
True.
with that. But right after that, they see that Cornelius is up in the trees, and that causes the next couple of events. And like we never get the other gorillas talking about it if they're on board, but they do react very negatively to that. So it's like they were aware of it, but they didn't know how to say no. I don't know. I don't know. Because again, we're dealing with this situation where in 1993, all it took was an ape that could talk to some of the apes, and then after a couple of years, they're all just basically dumb humans who are really strong. Like, that's all it took. Does that apply to all animals? If you just go talk to them and like hang out with them a little bit, do they just start becoming more sentient and form a society? Like, they didn't, in this almost pillar of sci-fi from previous films and all that, there's not even a single bullshit sci-fi explanation as to how the apes become so smart so fast. They just are.
It's really kind of frustrating because the earlier movies set up a very, for sci-fi, a very believable situation where it took hundreds of years for apes to develop the society that
constant
they had.
Exposure
and the society
to
that
humans.
they had was pretty rudimentary still.
Yes,
like
it
they,
was.
and they had advancements that humans didn't have at the level that they had because of, I believe, the history of humanity on the planet. But in terms of like living conditions and their daily tools and whatnot, they were living very simply. And yet in these past few movies, Caesar shows up, and within the span of not even 10 years, these apes are fully created a society talking about rights and equality and
time
travel.
Yeah.
Like
also, that's another thing I don't really like, and it's probably not fair because these are movies from the 70s, but it is implying something species-based, which is that the gorillas are just mindless brutes. The chimpanzees are basically people, and for whatever reason, the orangutans are like intellectuals. And what is that about? I know that, again, that was implied in the first Planet of the Apes, and that's just reflecting this. But that's a series-wide thing. And but in the first one, it is more suggested and more possible that it's kind of a cultural thing. The orangutans as a species have chosen intellect and theory and philosophy. The gorillas have become drunk with their strength, and the chimpanzees, being the smallest and the less spoken, they are the pacifists, they are the thoughtful and empathetic ones, and blah, 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 blah. But in this time period, in this timeline, in the last one, in Conquest, they're all on the same playing field. 12 years later now, all the orangutans are philosophers, all of the gorillas are brutes, and the chimpanzees are basically the default people.
I don't feel like they even tried to distinguish those roles in the slavery roles they played.
Not at all. And they could have. They could have. The gorillas could have been. Well, I don't want to encourage animal slavery, of course, but like the gorillas could have been the beasts of burden. The orangutans could have been the filers in offices and such, and the chimpanzees could have been the waiters and stuff, the more personable ones. You could have done something here. There's potential there. You could have done it, but you didn't. Damn it. Movie, go back and fix yourself. Anyway.
Those time paradoxes.
Yeah, I know.
Fly to London and then back to New York. And
yeah. Also, I do, since we're shitting on it, I do want to take a second. Even though the budget for this was slashed again, they've done better with their lack of money. They did. The masks are way better. There are way more apes in this movie that have way more believable faces. It's not quite the same as like Cornelius and Zero, but it's way better than the pullover masks that you see in the background of the second Apes movie. Like, they look good.
And the only time I felt like it was super proppy or like set designed was when they were in the city. I felt like everything else it felt textured. It felt like it could exist in the world. Obviously, the practicality of putting tree houses in your village rather than just building them on the ground is kind of
well, it's because apes live in trees, don't you know?
Yeah, I understand that, but it doesn't, like, the moment I saw it, I was like, So we're starting this new society, and we want to start it by building the hardest possible
Yeah.
structure to survive.
Of
to
these
build.
three as well, only one of them actually live in trees.
Right. So I don't know. I get the movie aesthetic reason, but practicality, I was just kind of like immediately I was like, that makes no sense.
No
But it's
sense.
fine. I feel like this is something that I wanted to mention earlier, but I just doesn't really fit with anything, so I'm just gonna mention it. I think the performance paradox that Virgil was talking about in the beginning is a nod to the paradox of these movies.
It is.
Where there's like a, sort of a cyclical time travel deal going on here, and that's what it's talking about.
I think it's also more of a nod to the book because there's meant to be kind of that time travel thing as well, which we'll talk about next week because that movie explores it kind of. I've got a lot to say. But I do think that was meant to be a nod to the book, which I mean, in a way is kind of cool. I have never read the book. I do want to. If it is, I think it's only the one, and now we're like 5 movies into a series that's loosely based on the book, and they're still maybe trying to pull in some references, some nods to the source material. That could be cool. I mean, speaking of which, I do like the character of Virgil. I found him cool. I found him fun. He's a good little guy. Yeah, I don't know. There's not a whole lot more to say, I guess, because like it's just a continuous, this doesn't make sense, this could have been done different, why did they do this? Like,
well, I feel like this one has kind of it has a pieces but not the whole problem, in the sense that all the little things that happen I think are pretty interesting. The conflict between apes and humans in the society, the conflict between Aldo and Caesar and their philosophies, the way that they're structuring the society, the fact that the armory is like kept even from the leader is a cool thing, but then the fact that Caesar is most definitely still a king in this situation, it's not really like a democracy. All this stuff is really interesting and cool, but I don't feel like it comes together as a cohesive whole for an interesting movie. I feel like there's a lot of pieces that I like, but in terms of feeling structured well overall, I'm not sure that it has that.
It felt like a really long episode of like Twilight Zone or something.
Kinda,
like a cool
or maybe like
world.
they stitched 2 episodes of the Twilight Zone together.
Yeah, like exactly. I don't think it felt like a movie, and I think part of that again is, and I know the times are different, and I get that, and I've been saturated in the structure of films these days, the formula. But in a movie with a conflict of 2 different peoples, typically you've got them finding out that the other exists. That happens. Check. You have like maybe the first scuffle, whatever. Check. Then you have the first conflict, so they could figure out where they rank. One of them maybe wins.
They kind of learn
the other
about
goes,
each other.
the other goes back and has to recalibrate, and then they have the big ending climactic battle. That is not here. The humans find out that, like you said, because they're just awful, that the apes just exist. They say, what direction did they go in? That way. Well, I'm sure they never turned left or right ever, so we'll just walk that way 3 days into the desert and find their camp.
I mean, they did.
They did. And then we'll just go and we'll kill them all because we're bored. They go, they fight, they lose terribly, then get shot up in a school bus by the gorillas.
They lose terribly, and Aldo and his other soldiers aren't even in the fight.
They aren't even involved in the fight. And then it's just, that's it. That's the battle. That's it.
Well, there's a cool line that one of the like leader humans has about like every Caesar needs his Brutus or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's not even the Brutus. No. Aldo is the Brutus.
I know, exactly. Exactly. And Brutus loses. So like what are you doing? What are you doing? Like there is a potential for this to go like the Dune direction. Like you could have made this whole movie, you could have revamped the whole thing. You could have made Caesar the bad guy, and Virgil.
I like that they don't. But
I do like that they don't. But you could have if you wanted to bring in that little back and forth and have fun with it. Because you're also, I guess with Caesar it's kind of different because he's aware of it. You imagine saying that to the ape. Like every Caesar has their Brutus, and the ape's like, "What the fuck are you talking about? I don't know your stupid human stories. What do you mean?" Brutus, like, anyway. Yeah, I mean, they all get their asses kicked, and it's just that's where it ends. And then Brutus, Aldo, and Caesar have a bit of a fight when it's finally revealed to Caesar that, yeah, Aldo killed his son.
I liked that moment, actually. I feel like it doesn't fix the movie overall, but it was one of those moments that I felt like was really good in terms of revealing how the society is developing. Like, the timing is a little dramatic, I'll give you that. But Aldo and the other like gorillas are keeping the humans in this corral, and they're all caged up, and Caesar is trying to get them to let the humans go, kind of. And it's revealed that Aldo killed his son, and everyone goes, "Ape killed ape?" for like
What?
5 minutes.
I know, it's a little much.
And it's interesting because the attitude changes so quickly. Like, even the other gorillas, once they realize that Aldo became a murderer, they turn against him.
I guess,
and
but that would have been more
like,
interesting if it was a secret. They watched it happen.
well, I didn't realize that he actually died. He was only injured for when he landed, and then he died later of his injuries. I mean, people knew, right?
Yeah.
But it's still,
I don't
like, technically hadn't been killed yet.
I don't
There's a
know,
gray
though,
area.
because I don't remember how much they talk about little Cornelius being injured / still alive while out in the village, because if you're a gorilla and you're there at that campfire and you watch him chop the kid out of a tree and he lands on the ground and you're like, oh, okay, it's fine because he's not dead, like, and he's not moving, he's unconscious, like, how did you like, you knew he did, like,
brain cells do
what?
you think those gorillas have?
I don't know, but it's like, it's enough for them to hear that the kid is dead, and then they change their mind. But they saw, like, if they're so dumb it took a while for that to click, I don't think they'd have enough cognitive ability to think, well, he might still be alive. They'd assume he's dead.
Well, and you make an interesting point about how, like, kind of back a couple minutes when you said that they weren't totally on board with the whole let's take over from Caesar. And then they see Aldo seriously injure Caesar's kid, and they just don't do anything about it. They're like, it's fine. Aldo did it, so I guess it's fine. I don't know. I will say, though, going back to the whole when they find out, McDonald saying, like, they all get kind of murderous, and one of the humans is like, what is going on? McDonald goes, I believe they just joined the human race. Such an interesting statement.
I thought that was dumb as hell. I didn't think that made any sense. I knew you were gonna like it because I'm sure there's some sort of weird writing thing about it.
I want to know about it.
I just thought that was...
It suggests...
I don't think it does. It suggests
that murder is central to what it is to be human.
Okay, well, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
I don't know that I believe that, but the statement here, which lines up with so much else of what this series has, the statement here is that violence and killing those that are in your same group is inherent to what it means to be human. And I think in this instance, what it means to be sentient, maybe. Because I don't know. I don't know exactly how to put this, because it just seems... I've never really thought about it like this before, like that murder is centered to what it is to be sentient or to what it is to be human. But I guess only a sentient thing would murder, per se. And only a sentient thing would really feel the loss of that murder. Like there's something that actually is pretty central about this idea. I don't know if it's what makes humanity per se, which seems to be what it's suggesting, but it does seem to be fairly central to the idea that violence and sentience go hand in hand.
I interpreted it differently. I like your interpretation better, because it seemed like as soon as the apes react to the murder, and they're like, ape not kill ape, and they keep saying it over and over again, it seemed like that's when he says, like that's what he's reacting to. It's like it looks like they just joined the human race, and I'm like, you smug motherfucker. Like I took that as because they give a shit. Now he's like, oh, now they're like on the same level as the human race. Like,
that's not how I interpreted it.
That's what I interpreted as, and I was like, McDonald, you need to sit your ass down. Like, you don't get to say that. Like, what the hell, man? I get there's an interesting conflict between him and Caesar throughout the movie, and I do like it. I do think it's interesting, and Caesar needs to kind of like up his he needs an update on the times for sure. But I interpreted that as kind of like Kirk's line sometimes to Spock. Like, you know what, Spock, everyone's humans. Like, I find that remark insulting. Like, no, we are not humans. Shut your damn mouth. Like, that's how I took it. I like yours better.
Right.
I would have given that an A+ on a paper. But I think it might be the placement of where it is to what the apes are doing right before he says it that catches me off guard. Like, so now I don't know exactly what it is he's referring to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is vague enough that it could be open to both interpretations, but I find the one where it talks about how violence and humanity seem to walk hand in hand seems to make way more sense with the overall franchise and the message of the franchise. And I also feel like it's a interesting introduction to the essential trial by combat that Caesar has with Aldo there. They go one-on-one, climb up a tree, and Caesar kills Aldo in revenge, essentially.
Right. Very not humanity, but, whatever.
No, but the idea that in breaking their most sacred rule, Aldo deserves death via the one who is lost, right? It's not justice. It's not fully revenge because it is a little justice. And it's an acceptance of the idea that once one has killed, killing them is acceptable, which is not something that previously existed in their society. Right. They were like, don't kill at all. Like, they were going to let the humans go. Aldo messed that up, but they were going to let the humans go. So, like, I think that's interesting. I think that has to do with the quote about entering or becoming a part of the human race.
Well, I think I think you are correct, but I do think as well it's still there's a layer to this that's more interesting that they screwed up again because of the amount of stuff they wanted to put in this movie, in which again feels like nothing really happens. It's that I interpreted when Caesar finds out what happens to Earth in the future, and he's like, well, what the heck, man? The apes destroyed the world. And Virgil's like, no, not the apes, the gorillas. And it seemed like Caesar now kind of had this thing in the back of his head. It's like, okay, so I just need to remove Aldo from the board. There's nothing else to do. And one way or another, I need to get rid of him. And I found that very interesting because it's like, how do you do that as a leader? Like, you're having this dude who's causing issues. And they talked about it a little bit as well, like the problems that he's causing and how do you deal with it. And also be like this benevolent ruler and whatnot. And we don't get to deal with any of that at all because the conflict between Caesar and Aldo at the end is because he killed his son. Not because that the gorillas might end up causing the apocalypse. Not because they keep causing issues within the camp. Not because of the coup. Because he killed his son. Like, that's all you need for that conflict to happen. And that's the only reason that conflict really happens in the end anyway. And there's, I think, way more interesting things and other motivations that they set up and then do nothing with. It's like Batman versus Superman, where Luthor spent a whole movie manipulating Superman into wanting to fight Batman with all these things and lies, and then he kidnaps his mother and tells him to go fight him anyway. So what was the point of all this other shit? You set it up, man. You had pieces here.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point because having Aldo kill Cornelius is almost like a cheat to allow Caesar to kill him.
Right.
Whereas as a leader, having no personal loss in it, just being responsible for the society, and Aldo jeopardizing that society and that philosophy.
And then Virgil's like, do we punish people for things that they have not done yet? Like, there's interesting debates here to be had. And none of it. We get none of it because it is It is vengeance, but it's also quote unquote justice because it's life for a life, eye for an eye, death penalty, whatever. It's also there's a little bit of Caesar doesn't do it. He just stops him from he stops Aldo from swinging the sword at him, and Aldo loses his balance. So they incorporate the movie cliche of the villain falls off of something and the hero didn't actually do it. So
they didn't deliver the killing blow or whatever.
Right. Like, so again, there are pieces here. There are some really, really good pieces, but they don't even come close to coming together, and some of them are completely disregarded. And it's unfortunate.
Well, it does kind of feel like, in comparison to, like, almost the legacy and the pattern that the previous movies have established, it does feel a little bit like these most recent two are pulling their punches a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think this is a part of it, because even though killing Cornelius, Caesar's kid,
was dark.
Even though that's emotionally terrible, like you feel horrible for him. It's dark that the kid actually died, but it's a scapegoat, or it's a escape hatch where they no longer have to confront the societal problem,
right?
Because they now have a personal problem. Yeah. And so rather than Caesar becoming a morally gray character because he's trying to lead a new society and he has to deal with a problem, like you were saying, it now becomes Caesar is a father getting revenge / a leader getting justice kind of at the same time, which narratively is interesting, but isn't really in line with what these movies were previously doing, which is talking about society at large and how violence plays a role in society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's still very much trying to be an anti-war movie with both the human and an ape character or multiple ape characters talking about how the war is pointless. We should just cut off the chain of violence. Like, we don't need to do this anymore. It's dumb. It's like, you're not going to get points just because you put it in the background. Like, you didn't do anything with this, man. You just didn't.
You make a good point.
Yeah. But I think, again, this is arguably more interesting than Escape from Planet of the Apes, but Escape is just way more fun. They made, it's a more fun movie, and it's got better characters, so it's more
the only thing that really gets super interesting with Escape is the end, where it suddenly all starts becoming super serious. Whereas this movie is, I would argue, fairly interesting throughout, but with no
payoff,
consistency, or there's no payoff, maybe is a good way to put it. Yeah.
I found that first like running around sequence in the Undercity to be kind of boring, because we don't know where we are. We don't know the layout. It's not like, and they keep coming up with clever ways to evade the humans, but it's like, it's dark. You don't really understand. I didn't really know, like, where are we trying to get to? Like, and they keep,
as a whole, just take the city part out.
Really, just do.
Cut it out.
Just do. It's because
just have Caesar have access to the tapes somehow. It doesn't make any sense. Just let him have it.
Like something. Also, I'm a little confused because we had to incorporate that humans nuked themselves. But in the first movie, it's like, oh yeah, of course they did. Because, humans be humaning. But then at the end of the last movie, this conflict is started by the apes, and then a different human war started, because there's no way, like, you're not going after the apes if you nuke the city. Like,
I'm not really sure.
They were kind of vague about that, because that has to be a different conflict, because that was not the ape war. That just wasn't. Yeah. There's no way, because it says after that it was the bloodiest war that ever happened. And I'm like, are you talking about the apes? Because there's no way it was.
Well, and they kind of left it super vague, because I think they mentioned that Caesar takes his group of people and like immediately like kind of tries to escape things, but they also, like, it's vague enough that the ape slave rebellion could have been the initiating act of the nuclear war. And yet, if you're nuking human cities and killing human people, even if your targets are the apes in the cities, right? You're killing civilians. Is that really war on the apes, or was there something else going on?
Right.
It's not explained at all.
Not at all. And like you can kind of like assume maybe it was like Fahrenheit 451. There's like a war going on in the background during, but I don't recall anything being alluded to that. No references to that in the last movie. And if they do reference it in this movie, it is very quick and kind of offhand, and it's hand in hand with the conflict with the apes. And then it gets all tangled up, and it sounds like they're talking about that fight. It's like, yeah, man, these apes, those sons of bitches, they got their hands on some cooking knives and a blowtorch, and we had nukes, and somehow we missed, and we nuked ourselves. And here we are now. The whole world's destroyed. Man, those damn apes. Like, what? Yeah, I don't know. And that's where the series ends. Well, I think there's technically a show. I think there's a show and probably some books, but as far as movies go, that's where it ends. It ends in a new timeline.
It is worth noting
with
the final
humans,
scene.
Yes, yeah. Humans and
600
apes
years in the future
live together in peace and whatnot.
And like the lawgiver is teaching both of them, and the message seems to have changed from avoid man to take care of each other. And then there's a random tear on Caesar's statue, and it's super controversial as to what it means, because I thought when I first watched it, I was like, why is he crying? Oh, is it like a tear of happiness because he succeeded and everything is good? And then I looked it up, and apparently it's like an ominous sign that things are going to fall apart in the future. Like, people have said that in interviews.
Oh, well, see, I was going to say, because when Taylor comes into it, it's like 2,000 years or 1,000 years in the future. So maybe they intended to make another one where things do fall apart again, which would be interesting if we are in a time loop situation. Because I wondered if they were going to do this thing where, again, remove the human city, where Aldo takes over and rewrites history so that he's the first ape to speak.
When I heard his name.
That's what I thought they were gonna do, and they don't do shit with that.
I mean, I gotta be honest, I ended up not being very interested in the Aldo character when it was clear that he was just gonna be a brute who didn't really have anything interesting going on. He just wanted to rule stuff. But I feel like, especially with the name there must have been a draft where this movie ended terribly.
Yeah. It'll be fun to talk about in the next couple of weeks, because Planet of the Apes as a whole has not been kind to gorillas in different ways. The originals treat them very poorly, and the new ones treat them differently. Can't talk about how, because you haven't seen them yet, but gorillas have gotten a very unfortunate hand dealt to them in these movies. It's rough, man, because I love gorillas. But actually, but that's where we're at, I think, with this one. Any other final thoughts? I forgot to mention at the beginning, it takes forever for this movie to get started, because they spend a long time recapping everything since Zira and Cornelia showed up in the 70s. And it takes a while.
And honestly, like, I understand why they do it narratively, because memory is short and fallible, but there's only, like, 3 years difference between these movies?
Well, we mentioned in one of the previous episodes, this was kind of unprecedented, a series getting this many sequels of a continuous story. Like, we're used to it now. It wasn't a thing back then. So I guess for people who somehow live under a rock, because again, the internet doesn't exist, and they go outside and they see a theater and it's like, oh wow, this cool Planet of the Apes, cool, never heard of that. Just to find out, like, oh wow, this is the 5th one in a story. What?
Well, and it's not like they're numbered either.
That
it's not like
too.
Planet of the Apes 5 or whatever.
Yeah. See, if you don't number them, you don't have to do weird things when you line them all up. Lucas, maybe don't just start numbering them randomly. Anyway, yeah, that's where we're at. Planet of the Apes. Yeah, now, next week, though, because we're trying to do for what's the word? Can't even think of it.
I have no idea what you're going for.
I don't have it. But to be thorough, that's kind of what I was thinking. We're doing all of the Planet of the Apes movies. So next week is going to be a hard left into nothing relevant, and we are going to watch the Tim Burton one. So have fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
See you next time.
We'll see how Burton does with this content.
Bye.
Well, are we going to do is it a whale?
Oh, I'm so sorry. See, gosh, 7 days and I already forget. 'Tis not a whale. I would say 'tis not.
No,
'tis not a whale. 'Tis maybe a whale carcass.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like some blubber and some fins.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe just the weird bristled teeth. This is getting more.
Yeah.
'Tis not a whale. 'Tis not a whale.
No.